surrender is different. It's allowing, it's accepting, it's non-judgment, it's grace. It's just being with whatever is at the moment. I met with this group in this little community center in Kigali, and these women were just so delightful and gracious and full of life, yet living in the most destitute circumstances. We'll never know, not even a tenth of the impact that we've had on other people's lives over the course of our own life.
In today's episode, we meet my friend Mary Beth Bezzina. Together we explore surrender through the lens of wisdom that comes with age. We talk about what happens when we loosen our grip, trust life a little more, and say yes to something new, often discovering it becomes one of the most meaningful and impactful moments of our lives. It's a conversation about flow, perspective, friendships, and the unexpected opportunities that meet us when we stop forcing and start allowing.
One story that I no longer tell about myself is that I don't have what it takes to do whatever it is that I dream of doing.
So welcome to the first ever guest episode of Midlife Unfiltered. I'm your host, Margit, coach, guide, and cricket-playing yogi. But basically, what I really love is people. I am beyond thrilled to introduce my first guest, and that is Mary Beth Bezzina. Mary Beth and I met in an online program that we did together in 2019. I like to call it a non-coincidental meeting because despite me living in Australia and Mary Beth living in London, Ontario, that's in Canada, not in UK, I consider her one of my soul sisters in the world, and I was absolutely supposed to meet her in this lifetime. Mary Beth is an occupational therapist, educator, mentor, and what she beautifully describes as a guide on the side. She walks alongside women and men who are awakening to their own truth and transitioning from a conventional life to a more soul-led one. Over the past 4 decades, Mary Beth has mentored hundreds of occupational therapy students, supported clinicians in the field, and now works full-time as an academic lead in clinical education at Western University. Alongside this, her life took a profound turn through her work in Rwanda, where she supports healthcare providers and leaders around maternal health, ethics, gender equity, mental health, and collaboration. Work that continues to shape how she sees humanity, leadership, and service. Mary Beth brings a beautiful combination of wisdom, humility, humour, and deep compassion. She doesn't lead from the front, she cheers from the sidelines. She helps people see their own light and gently supports them to live lives of meaning, purpose, and joy. Welcome, Mary Beth.
My goodness, Margit. That's the most beautiful bio intro that anybody's ever given me. Thank you so much. Wow.
I love that. I think it's, it was really interesting when we were talking beforehand about the bio and this is how I see you. This is genuinely how I see you. I just think you're amazing and beautiful, and yet we don't always see ourselves in that same kind of light. So I guess that's partly why I want to talk around Midlife Unfiltered, about starting to remove some of those filters that we have around ourselves, around who we are and how we show up in the world. So I am super, super excited to have you here.
Me too. So excited to be here.
So we had a pre-chat, because that's what you do when you're hosting a podcast. And in the pre-chat, we had some really interesting sort of themes come up and things that we decided we wanted to talk about. And where I'd love to start is where I think it's kind of appropriate at the moment. And, we're recording this towards the end of the year. It'll come out in the early new year. And this is when people start thinking about, what are their goals? What am I going to do for this coming year? And, I hear it all around me is the word manifesting. And I loved when we had this pre-chat, we're talking about manifesting and how you've seen this shift in midlife from manifesting to the idea of surrender. And I would love to hear just a bit more about that from your perspective.
So when we first met, it was a time of learning about what manifesting was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And we had conversations in those first few years quite often about manifesting and how do we manifest the things that we dream of in our lives, which was great. It was fine, and it was fun to have those dreams. And I had this picture book of dreams that I wanted to manifest, and some of them came true and others didn't. And in the last year or two, that has evolved into this new direction of surrender. And I think, quite honestly, largely through my conversations with you and our dear soul sister Leah. Those conversations have led me to go deeper, and I feel that surrendering is just the next step for me. And not that it needs to be the next step for anybody else, but it feels like the next step for me in my spiritual journey. And I think that one of the things that appeals to me most about surrender is that there's no effort. It felt when I was trying to hear that word trying. There always seemed to be effort involved and expectations. And when am I going to manifest this dream? When's that going to happen? And what do I have to do? And there was always effort and expectations and judgment if that dream never came true, disappointment. Those kinds of things were all part of that. Whereas surrender is different. It's allowing, it's accepting, it's non-judgment, it's grace. It's just being with whatever is at the moment. And that's my journey right now. It's a big, huge learning curve. It's in itself.
Yeah, it's really different, isn't it, in midlife? Because I remember when I was younger and there's this sensation that I wanted to try, like, hey, I'm going to manifest this. And manifesting, of course, is that idea of creating what we want. And, we talk about it with vision boards, and we put our pictures up, we have these intentions, and now I'm going to go and I'm going to create this and manifest and bring this into my life. Because we live in a creational universe. Like we can create anything. I just think it's a bit harder to create some things than others. And so I remember when I was younger, really trying to control, like, okay, I've got to make this happen, but I'm working with the universe. And there's this sense of almost working against yourself in sometimes when we're trying to manifest, simply because it's not just the attachment, because we, as much as we say, don't be attached, we have this attachment, but surrender to me in midlife feels much more like stepping into a flow and stepping out of our timing, what we think it should be, and even how we think these things should come into being, right? Because
Yes.
surrender is in part not just what happens, but the way that it unfolds for us.
Absolutely. That's so true. That's so true. And along with surrender is a couple of your other favorite things that you talk about often, and that is ease and playfulness.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in surrender, you can be in a state of ease. It is a state of ease. There's no striving and judgment, and like you said, attachment to anything in particular. It's that ease, playfulness, grace that just, it does feel like it's an evolution. Yeah.
What do you notice for you, like as you step more and more into surrender? Like I heard that you said that it's a thing that you're learning. It's, it isn't natural, in part because of the way the world is talking to us and communicating with us at the moment. What are you noticing for yourself as you step more into surrender?
How do I describe it? I think a gradual increase in this sense of ease about life and trusting life. That's a huge part of it for me. And truthfully, it's not been easy to trust life for me. I don't know. It might be easier for some people than for others. For me, it's not been easy to trust this life, and I can't even really explain why. But that's what it seems to boil down to. That I'm second guessing, and so surrender is, allowing things to unfold and not second guessing, and just being with it. And sometimes that means you know, allowing things to process through that are really hard, things that
Mm-hmm.
happen that really suck.
Yep.
And
I hear you there.
yeah, and it's all I can say is that it is a learning process,
Yeah.
and I think it does get easier over time.
Yeah, and maybe because as we grow older, we apparently gain wisdom.
Yeah,
But when we take that time to kind of be present with ourselves and reflect on our life. And I think it's really interesting just where judgment fits into all of this, because I think maybe taking some judgment out of who we are, the way we are, how life is unfolding for us, how we're getting to certain results, or whether we're getting to certain results or not, has a really big impact as well. I know it does for me. I kind of find when I can step out of judgment, particularly around myself, which is I find that really hard to do. But when I can do that, suddenly I have this this greater sense of ease and grace.
yeah, for sure. And I can give you an example, and in the
Mm.
recent couple of years of how this shift has impacted my life in a pretty major way. So, as you know, Margit, I've been a coach for a number of
Hmm.
years, and I believed so strongly that this was the direction, that this is where I had the most to offer to this world, is in being a coach, a transitional life coach, a transformational life coach.
Hmm.
And so I started on that path, and it was right at the beginning of COVID, and it just never really took off. I That was hard. That was disappointing because I really thought this was it for me. This was the
Yeah.
thing. So time went on, and then I had this opportunity a couple of years ago to go back to the university and take a contract there, and it was a part-time contract. And in the last 2 years, that's evolved now into a full-time 3-year contract. And I remember you saying to me in one of our calls together, you know, maybe this is exactly what you're here to do, and you can still do that same thing that you've been envisioning all this time. It's just you're doing it in a different context. And I went, that was really an eye opener for me, and that's exactly what I've embraced in this role, and I'm absolutely loving it. And I'm not sure that I would have so quickly accepted the opportunity when it just kind of fell into my lap. The part-time one was easy to accept, but the full-time one, I really,
Mm.
I think I would have resisted it much more, because it just wasn't the direction I thought that my career was going to go in these last years of my work life. Um, but I surrendered to it, and it's turned out to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I've got to be honest, because I mean, I'm lucky enough to talk to you regularly, and I've just really seen you blossom taking on this role and really owning it, and the difference that you make, the care that you have for the students and the placements they're going out to, but just who they are as people. And I love that you're helping them become more soul led, but they don't even know it. Right? So I remember you were telling me I think it was through the application process, you had to present a little project or
Yeah,
present a little presentation.
I did.
And what was your topic again? Because it was fascinating at the time. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, she's so brave.
So my profession is occupational therapy, and I'm sure lots of your listeners don't know much about what that profession is about, but the topic was spirituality in occupational therapy. Yeah, it was a little bit bold to make that my topic.
It wasn't a little bit bold. I thought it was really bold and really brave, but it was also really you. And I think this is the thing that in midlife, perhaps in your 30s, you would never have done that. And not just because that probably wasn't what was being talked about so much, but also just because within the self, we don't have that sense of, no, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to show up. And so for you doing that offered the people who were, going through the decision making process something really different to think about as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was fun doing that, and I think um, I did get people thinking a little bit about what that could mean for our profession. Yeah,
Yeah, and you got the job, right?
I did.
Yeah, yeah. And now you're rocking it, and I love that. And
Thank you.
this is perfect because I think this is, when we talk about this midlife, it's really easy to see it as the start of the decline. Like I do see a lot of people who are kind of like, oh, like I'm on the downhill now. I'm like, no, this is midlife. This is where you get to embrace the wisdom that, quite frankly, we've earned by now. Like we've gone through hard things. We have had life, you know, slap us around a bit, let's put it that way. And we've earned that, but we do have this beautiful wisdom to share. And you stepping into that was kind of allowing your wisdom to shine through whilst giving people something to think about, and of course then allowing yourself to shine, which I think is so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, I feel very fortunate that it's all worked out this way. Just yeah.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because this is that whole manifesting, surrender, how are things working out, the
Mhm.
judgment. We kind of wrap it all in a nice little bundle, and we like to wrap things up and go, okay, this turned out well. This turned out the way that I hoped it would. But when you step back and take a look at that bigger picture, you kind of probably wouldn't have said that 6 years ago. You wouldn't have said, I'm going to be content doing this. But yet now here you are, and you're recognizing I can do my work in the world through this means, like in this medium. It doesn't have to be the way I thought it was going to be. I've seen a lot of that in my own career when I've worked at different places, and I've kind of, I'm like, I just want to be a full-time coach. And I'm like, now I find myself working in a school, or I find myself working at a council. And as I've grown older and more wise, hopefully, I've really recognized the value that I've brought to those places in showing up the way I am. And whether or not it turns out the way I always thought it would, it doesn't actually matter. So really letting go of that is and following the energy, as I like to say, is I like to say that.
For sure. You know what I often think about, and this is the perfect time of year to to mention this. One of my very favorite movies is "It's a Wonderful Life,"
Mm,
and George Bailey in this movie, gets to experience what the world would have been like if he had never been born. And I often think about that when I think about your experiences that in your work life, working at the school and then working for the council. What if you weren't there? What if Margit had never been in those roles and people had missed out on that opportunity to know you and to experience all of the great gifts that you brought to those roles? And it's so interesting to imagine that and to think about all the different aspects of our lives and all the people that we've impacted over the course of our lives, and we'll never know, not even a tenth of of the impact that we've had on other people's lives over the course of
mm.
our own life. And to me, that's just I just love that thought of it, the thought of each of us and all the amazing ways that we have positively affected others in this world.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Because I love to think about that. Not think about what if I wasn't here, but to think about life in that context of, the difference that we make that we don't even realize that we make. And it's particularly in midlife, like you can kind of look back and we pick on the things that we know, but there's so much that we don't know. So many people that we come in contact with and who we've made change for, and we don't even know it.
Mm,
Yeah, and it's all the
so
little
true.
things. Yesterday we were, my partner Brett and I, we were in a car park and we witnessed a car hitting another car as it came to park, and it's always not a very nice situation. There was quite a bit of damage to certainly to their car and some to a young P plater's car. And a P plater in Australia is someone who's in the first couple of years of having their license, their full license, and and so we were in this car park, and we kind of thought, look, I'm sure that P plater is in the gym. And this man said, "Oh, I'll go and get a piece of paper." We were outside a stationery store. So we were outside this store. He said, "I'll go and get a piece of paper and I'll leave a note." And I kind of went, "Oh, will you?" We see a lot of people who kind of walk away. And for some reason, we both said, "Oh, I think we might just go and see if we can find the young person in the gym and just see they could come out and have a chat with the man who had hit them." Anyway, so we have to kind of break into this gym because it's one of those swipe gyms where you can only get in with a swipe card. So someone was coming out and we explained to them, this is what's happened. We want to try and get in. We go, yeah, the owners know us. We used to be members here, but we're not now. So he lets us in. And amongst this gym, there's lots and lots of people in there. We kind of went, who might own this car? Oh, we think maybe those two. And we walked over to these and we said, does this happen to be your car? And they're like, yes. So the first people that we went to, and they were right in the middle of the gym. It wasn't like they were the closest that we could get to. But we went out and we just told them, look, someone's hit your car. You need to come out and exchange details and what have you. It would have been really easy to walk past that and not make any effort. And, this is just a small example, right? But that young person was just so grateful that we had bothered to go in and talk to them. And if I'm really honest, when we saw the guy come out of the store, he didn't have any paper or a pen. And so you kind of go, well, I wonder what would have happened. And so there's little moments like that right through your life. But then there's those moments where you just say something to someone and it makes a difference. That smile at a stranger as you're walking down the street, those stories when you hear that people are having a really down day, but you just offer them a smile and it kind of lights up their world. Like that to me, just, they're the little moments that we can just make such a difference without ever knowing it.
So true.
Mm.
So beautiful. What a great story, Margit. I love that.
I had no idea I was going to share that story at all. But it was just an interesting flow, right? And this is part of the surrender. This was literally the surrendering to us too. We just went, actually, it feels right to go and find this. Someone came out at the right time. We were able to get in. We went, straight to the owners of the car, which you can't predict, but we just followed the energy. And it was so, just these young people, they were grateful. I think the guy that hit the car may not have been as grateful, but that's okay. That's okay too. That's just all part of it. But I think I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of midlife awakening and elder wisdom, because it was really interesting to me. You were mentioning, in our pre-chat around the spiritual awakening kind of at 50. And 50 is, we call midlife anywhere between 40 and 65 now. 50 is kind of like that half of 100 thing, right? I don't know if it's the middle of midlife, but I really want to learn a little bit more about what that was and what happened for you and the impact of that.
Okay. Oh, it's fun to share the story. Thank you for opening up this opportunity for me. It was around that time. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but maybe my late 40s or close to 50. Your kids are grown up; they're teenagers, are not needing me so much as their mom anymore. And I hadn't really adopted any of my own things, any of my own hobbies or interests or passions yet. I was at an event. It was an event that was mostly women, actually, occupational therapists. The facilitator of the event had an icebreaker at the beginning of the day, and he asked each of us to share something interesting about ourselves that nobody else in the room would know. And we all knew each other in the room. And so, each person started sharing, and, somebody played the oboe in a community orchestra. And somebody collected vintage clothing and, really interesting things. And then it got to me, and I was sweating. I couldn't think of one single interesting thing to share about myself.
No.
I couldn't. So I said, I go jogging in the morning. That was the only thing I could think of saying. And it was such a huge wake up call for me. And just in that very moment, I decided I, I want to be an interesting person. I want to have things to talk about that, that light me up. I probably didn't use that phrase back then, but things that that excite me and things that I can share with others, and that will make me an interesting person. So I held that, and that might have been, I don't know, a year or two or three later. I had this opportunity to go to Rwanda, and you mentioned that
Mm.
at the beginning, and it just came straight out of the blue. At the time, I was doing contract work at the university, and one of my colleagues was involved in a project, and it was a maternal, newborn, and child health teaching and mentoring project in Rwanda. And she was going over to do a workshop with some of her colleagues, and she needed help. So she asked me if I would like to go. And I said, yes. I want to go. And I had never been to a developing country anywhere in the world, let alone in Africa. And so that first experience, it was just, it was life changing. And just seeing a part of the world that's so different to anything that I ever could imagine. Culture, the
Mm.
history, the genocide against the Tutsi people that had happened in 1994. This was around 2012 was when I went.
Hmm.
So less than 20 years later. And the country was still recovering. The country was still ravaged. Actually, the buildings were still in terrible shape, and the roads they were still in recovery mode at that point. And still are, really, but they've come a long, long way since my first visit there. But while I was there, I fell in love with the culture, with the people that I was working with. They're just so gracious, so
Mm.
kind and loving, and thankful and grateful for the Canadian government to fund this project. To help save lives, basically, of mothers and infants at the time of childbirth. And so I ended up signing on to the project. The leader of the project could see how this was impacting me, and he said, "Would you like to become a part of the project?" And I said, "Oh, I would love to." So I stayed on for that project, and then for the following, so that what happens often in these developing countries is that once a team of people from a developed country comes in and does a project and develops relationships with the government and with the health system in this case, it often happens that those same teams will come back for future projects
Mm.
because they've already established those relationships. They've already put kind of the infrastructure in place to make it easy to come back again. And each project tends to build on the one before it. So the next project was far bigger than the first one, and I was asked to be a team leader. And you had mentioned the areas that where the focus of my part of the project was around ethical practice and collaborative practice and maternal mental health and gender equality and gender-based violence were the themes that we call the cross-cutting themes. So while some of my colleagues were focused on the clinical parts of things, teaching healthcare providers and educators about how to take care of moms and babies to keep them healthy and safe, my team was working on this other aspect, sort of the softer skills that we were teaching healthcare providers that contributed to overall care. And it was just beautiful work, and I got to work with some amazing, talented, really brilliant healthcare workers and educators in Rwanda that I became very good friends with. And so all in all, went back and forth to Rwanda. I lost track, but maybe around 25 to 30 times before the pandemic hit, and then we had to cut our last project short, and we've not been able to get funding for another project since the pandemic. The pandemic just really messed things up in terms of our these kinds of projects from Canada. But I was able to go back, as you know, last year in 2024. I went back, took a group of women who were really interested in experiencing Rwanda and had the most amazing time, and got to revisit many of my old colleagues and friends and have such a wonderful time. But that whole experience really set me on the path, I think. There were other things that went on as well. And I had a wonderful therapist who turned into my spiritual coach, who really helped me to begin my spiritual journey as well. But the whole Rwanda experience was all a part of that as well, and just bringing me into a part of my life that I felt very led to be, to be there, to be offering what I could to help with this project and to learn and meet with these people.
And so you first went there in 2012, so you would have been what, 52, 53?
That's right, 52, I guess.
Yeah. So I find that really fascinating, because I think it's really easy, what I heard you say is that, like, you didn't think you were interesting, and and you wanted to be more interesting. And I think that happens to a lot of women, because you've been so focused on bringing up children. So if you have children, that's been your focus. Or if you have a career, you've kind of been focused on building your career or business or whatever it is. And so we kind of feel like, oh, I need something more. I'm ready for something more. Not that there's anything wrong with us or anything missing, but I can feel in my heart there's more for me. And then for you to just say yes to, right, let's go and do this in Rwanda, and not really knowing anything about the project, and then just kind of jumping in and falling in love with it. And I know I saw some of the photos from your last trip in 2020. It was 2024, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. I saw some photos from that, and there was such a sense of joy and camaraderie and togetherness about those photos. And it's kind of hard even to capture in words, I think, the energy of it, because of course the perception from the outside, it's really easy to sort of look at developing countries and have certain judgments. And yet your experience of it hasn't been like that. It's been joyful. And as you said, that they come with gratitude for the work that you're doing with them. But I also know for you, it's not like your trips are just, I go to Rwanda and I have these amazing experiences of helping people. There's a lot of back-end work that you're still doing whilst in Canada, in terms of fundraising and organising events and raising money to support these communities still. So I'd love for you to share just a little bit about that, because I know there's a bit of stuff in there for you around that, and the perceived success of some of those things sometimes.
Yeah, oh, sure. So early on in my experience in Rwanda, I became connected with a nonprofit there. So one of my colleagues who was working with us on the project in Rwanda, she had a nonprofit that worked with a few small communities of women in Kigali, which is the capital city, to support them in their parenting, their mental health, and their ability to seek employment or to earn an income that would support their families. So these were women living in very impoverished parts of the city, in mud huts, and often had multiple children, and were just living day to day, just scraping by. And so Emma, my friend, had started this nonprofit to help bring these women together into community. And she invited me in one of my early trips, like probably around 2013, she invited me to go with her to one of their meetings with this community of women. And so I was delighted to go with her. And so I met with this group in this little community center in Kigali. And these women were just so delightful and gracious and full of life, yet living in the most, destitute circumstances that we can imagine in our lives of privilege. And yet they had so much joy, and they, you know, well, I'll tell you a little story about not long after that first visit, I came back and was bringing with me a bunch of what are called prayer shawls. So my sister-in-law, through her church women's group, they knit these shawls. They're kind of like, actually they can be any size. So for us, they knit baby blankets, and so these are Catholic women, and they as they're knitting together, they pray for whoever is going to receive this shawl or this baby blanket. So I had like maybe 20, 25 blankets, and arrived at this meeting of the women's community and gave out the blankets, and they were just thrilled. So many of the women there had very young babies, and they were just thrilled to receive these blankets. What shocked me is that I explained to them through a translator, MA, my friend, translated, that the women who knit these blankets prayed for those that were receiving them, and they were so touched by that. And rather than just taking the blankets and expressing their gratitude for the blankets and the prayers, they said, well, we want to pray for them. And they said, we're going to pray for them. We're going to pray for those ladies that knit these blankets for us. And it just flipped everything around for me in my mind. I thought, this isn't just about us coming and, providing for these women. They have things to offer too. They have all kinds of things to offer, and it's and so over the years, it's really been very reciprocal. It's not just us raising money and giving them things to make their lives easier. It's much more about the relationships, and the relationships have proven to be far more impactful than any money that we could raise for them.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think that's so true. I think that's true generally around relationships, but I love that so much, that reciprocal nature, but it's natural, right? It was a natural giving and receiving and a natural exchange. Because, and we know this with that, even that idea of coming back to that idea of manifesting and surrender, that there's always an exchange, some sort of energetic exchange. And that exchange of these women, I want to say they felt the love of other people praying for them who didn't know them, who had never met them, but who bothered to make something for them and pray over it and pray for them. And then that reciprocal nature is like, oh, well, we want to do that too. That's such intentional living, right? That's what engenders more joy in our world, in a world where, quite frankly, we could look at it and think there's some things that aren't really the way that we we thought the world would be. And yet those little tiny things that we can do of that reciprocal nature bring this sense of peace and joy to our world.
So true. And just that notion that everyone has something to offer. Everyone, without exception, has gifts to offer. Yeah,
absolutely.
Just embracing that and seeing those gifts that are available. Yeah.
Yeah, so to anyone listening, if you think you don't have gifts, that would be wrong. Not that we ever go right or wrong, but I think it's really important to acknowledge, because I think it's really easy to not to just forget that we have these gifts, or not look at them and just get stuck into life, into a meh cycle. Right, this is my life, this is how I live it, and to forget that we have these gifts. And I certainly, I didn't know you back in 2012, but I know when you've talked to me about these stories of Rwanda and not just the work you've done, but as you said, the relationships that you've made, they've really touched my heart, which is also why I wanted you to be my first guest, because sometimes I think you don't see that so much about yourself. And it's like, wow, You are no longer a boring person officially.
Thank you. That was my goal.
Well, you can tick that one off. So it's interesting, we came into each other's lives, 6 years ago now, and I genuinely just think you are one of my soul sisters, without a doubt. That feels like the case for me. We were talking sort of before this about this idea, particularly in midlife, of that sacred female connection, and what that's like, and how that can change. I know some people. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were going to a primary school reunion. They do this regularly. They catch up every couple of months or so, and still meet with people they went to primary school with, or and others have these high school, these long life friends. But equally, I know there's quite a few of my really good soul sister friends who I've met later in life, who our commonality is not that we shared experiences growing up, but it's we share certain values, and certainly an appreciation for each other around this. And I hear you talking about that even around Africa. The most important thing that's come out of this is really the relationships. So I'm curious what that's like for you when you think about like soul sisters and friendship evolution, and how that fits for you in midlife.
I feel so, so fortunate with the friends and the soul sisters that I have. And it is fascinating. And still to this day, two of my closest friends are my best friend from high school and my best friend from university. And I still see them regularly. And I love them dearly. Yet I wouldn't call them my soul sisters. That's just not the kind of relationship that we have, but we still have a very dear relationship that's so important to me. And it's been more since I started this spiritual path in the last, I guess, 15 years that I've developed all these new friendships. And it's so interesting when it happens. It's there's this vibration that we have, Margit, and we just know, right? Like you know when you meet a person, and it feels like you've known this person for a very long time, and you've just met them, because you can just feel that they're vibrating in a similar way, I guess. The kind of, we're on the same wavelength, literally, with one another, and those connections just seem to happen. Not often, but when they do happen, it's easy, and the friendship usually develops very quickly, and then it's a different kind of friendship, and we do different kinds of things together than I do with my two best buddies from my growing up years, and it's beautiful. Like it's really filled this very deep need for these deeper feminine relationships with other women that I just feel very blessed. And you, as you know, Margaret, you and our friend Leah are two of my most dearest soul sisters that have had such a big impact on my life. I'm so blessed.
Yeah, and I totally feel that same way. It's kind of funny because there's this depth to the relationship that we have, and the things we talk about everything, like everything, and we're completely open and with each other about all the things in life. And yet we only meet once a month, but we make that effort every month to get together and have a couple of hours and have a cup of tea or wine, depending on what time of day it is for you, wherever you are. And though that relationship it's something that I truly, truly value, having that. And yet I also have these friends. I go walking every Friday. I love my walking group. I have my cricket friends. I have, there's different people. I have a couple of people from high school, but I don't really see them because we've all moved away from each other. We don't live near each other anymore. And I found that too in my friendships. I value them, and we make the effort to come together, and there's this freedom, right? There's this freedom in my life we can talk about whatever we want to talk about. We're not bound by any of the cool things anymore. Not that I think that I was ever actually that cool. Well, it's funny. I remember as a teenager, I loved playing cricket, and I can't explain why, but I do. And I did right back then, and it was not cool at all. And yet now I see these young girls that in Australia in particular, because cricket's a big sport here, we have this evolution of women's cricket that you're seeing. It's becoming popular and it's becoming like a thing, and you've got a bit of coolness about you if you can play cricket. And so I still go and play and take advantage of that. But I'm one of these pioneers, although I also know one of my friends is a former Australian cricketer who's now in her mid 70s, and she's phenomenal. But that little competitive edge that she has, that is still there, even when she plays lawn bowls now. It's really funny, and I just love it a bit. But yeah, that difference in our relationships of there's people that we do things with or have in our daily life, and we have that history with, but we can still have these new relationships and find that depth with new people, with new friends. And of course, with technology, that's not limited to people just in your area anymore, because that's how it used to be, right? But now, I remember doing my coaching course. I did an online coaching course. Now, I started back in 2004, before coaching was kind of cool. I'm seeing a theme here, yes. And we used to dial in on a telephone to a conference call, and we'd have people from all around the world. But for me, that adventure began back then. Yeah, and now that would be considered archaic to have to dial in on a telephone. Like now we get on here and we can record, record on videos and what have you. But I know that way of broadening my world was, it was available back then, albeit in a different form, and it is now. You and I met through an online course that we both did together, and we were in a group, and I think that is available to pretty much everyone, because there's lots of programs around. I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong program. I'll say my program's great, but
And it is.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting. It's just interesting to note that we don't have to fade away, that there's beautiful, amazing people out there to connect with in all sorts of ways, whether it's in your community or whether it's, online like we have. And then, of course, we had the pleasure of meeting each other a couple of years ago when I came over to Canada, and that then was a whole other experience in a lot of different ways.
Yes, so much fun.
Yes.
That's where I got to see your true energy, Margit. It still boggles my mind when I remember how much energy you had during that week.
Yeah, I do take that for granted, I must admit, the energy that I have. In fact, I play cricket for Queensland, and we go to nationals. I didn't play this year, but the last couple of years I have in the masters grade, so that's over 40, and they gave me the nickname Tigger on the field because
Right.
like when in the poo, I'm like Tigger. I just keep bouncing around.
Yeah, like quite literally, actually.
Quite literally. Yeah. Oh, well, Mary Beth, it has been an amazing pleasure and honor. I feel like there's lots of other things that we could talk about, and we talked about in pre, and maybe there's another podcast with you and I together in it. But I'd like to just finish with a few kind of, I call them popcorn questions. So they're just, ask and answer what kind of comes to your mind. So what brings you alive most right now?
Right now, I would have to say, working with the students that I'm teaching all the time, it really lights me up in a way that I never could have imagined that it would.
Yeah. And I see that in you, and I love that so much for you, particularly when it probably wasn't what you'd envisaged doing, and yet it's the thing that lights you up the most. I think that's beautiful. So what would your bravest self say to you about this chapter of your life?
I think my bravest self would say simply, trust it, trust life.
Mm.
Just trust it.
Yeah, I love that. So, what's one story that you no longer tell about yourself?
One story that I no longer tell about myself is that I don't have what it takes to do whatever it is that I, dream of doing. I quite often used to have that running through my head. You don't have what it takes. You're not going to be able to do this. I never tell myself that anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good. That's a really positive thing to not say about yourself anymore. Uh, I do. I think a lot of people. I think a lot of and women in particular have that old habit of I'm not sure I can do that. So I love that. That's a good story to drop.
Yeah, and especially at, I'm 65 now. I would have certainly said to myself, you do not have what it takes to go back. I haven't worked in a full-time paid position in many years. I've been working on my own for a long time. So to think that I could be successful in this employment situation, where it's very demanding, and I'm constantly have to be creating things and being in front of 92 students.
Mm.
I would have said to myself, no way can you do that at 65. Your brain doesn't work the way it used to, and it doesn't, but I'm still doing it.
And you're doing it really well. I do know that. And I know that because I can see it's lighting you up. And I know behind the scenes the amount of effort that you put in for those students.
Thanks, Margit.
So, what's something small but powerful that helps you feel more like yourself?
So this one, I might have said something different if it weren't today, but this morning I tapped. And you often remind me, because I know you tap a lot. And this morning I really needed to process some shit. Can I say that word?
Ooh, you just did.
Really had to process some shit that had gone on over the holidays in my family that I was upset about. And I thought, I don't want to hold on to this anymore. I don't want this to continue to, to have a grip on me. And then I remember tapping. I'll go for months and probably a year sometimes without tapping. And then I'll suddenly remember, like at a time when I really need it. And today I really needed it. And I tapped away for 10 or 15 minutes, and it just shifted. It shifted the energy for sure in me. So like it's simple, it's yet so powerful. I highly recommend learning how to tap, and it doesn't take long to learn how to do it at all.
It does not. In fact, do you know, we were talking earlier about your presentation. When I studied coaching, we had to do a research paper, and I chose my topic was energy healing techniques that you could use with coaching, because I love energy healing. I've done lots of energy healing work and modalities over the years, and even 21 years ago, the modality that stood out then was tapping. And by tapping, if you don't know what tapping is, we mean EFT, emotional freedom technique. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos about how to do it. And it is such a practical and reliable tool to help shift emotional baggage, let's call it, to shift our energy. If you've got phobias, it's amazing to help clear phobias and fears. And I love so much that you brought that into our conversation today, because it really is. It's such an amazing tool for anyone to use at any time. And my final question, if you could gift every midlife woman one reminder, what would it be?
Okay. Can I say more than one thing?
You can. Of course you may.
All right. Here's what I would say to every midlife woman. You are perfect in your imperfection. You have nothing to prove. We've been proving ourselves our whole lives. When you reach midlife, you don't have to do that anymore. You've got so much wisdom that you don't even realize, and so much wisdom to share. And there's so much of that. And I have one other very practical thing to add in there, and we talked about this in our pre-talk, and that is hormone replacement. So I was, for women who are listening to this podcast and are perimenopausal or premenopausal, if you haven't talked to your healthcare provider about hormone replacement, it's too late for me, and it's a big regret, if I can say that. I hate to use that word, but that I have. But women of my generation, physicians believed that hormone replacement was dangerous and that it could cause breast cancer and heart disease and who knows what else. But it turns out that the study that informed that belief was flawed. And now it's realized that hormone replacement therapy is in fact something that's very effective for women and can really help to slow down or minimize the effects of menopause. Things like, just to give a real example of muscle strength, when for women like me that did not have hormone replacement therapy, I work out every single day, but my muscles are still wasting away, and I've lost a tremendous amount of strength just really in the last 5 years since I turned 50 or 60. I've really noticed a change, and my understanding, and maybe it's not, I'm sure it's not a magic pill, but hormone replacement therapy can really help to slow down those kinds of effects of aging, or muscle loss of muscle mass, and sleep troubles. I have troubles with sleep, and hormone replacement therapy can help with that. So I mean, not saying it's a magic pill, and I know that the health experts would say that that in combination with regular exercise and eating well and sleeping well, all those things need to come together to keep you healthy as you get older. But
yeah, I think it's really interesting. So just to be really clear for those of you listening, we're not giving medical advice here. What we're talking about from Mary Beth's perspective is lived experience and advocacy. I know your experience was that the hormone treatment was considered, like, you didn't have the HRT because of misinformation. And so I think what I'm hearing here is get your information from a source that's, well, as accurate as it can be at this point, and make the decisions that's right for you. And you certainly are living in this time now where you wish you have taken the HRT, or you wish it had been available, more freely available, I guess, than it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because now
I have that option.
Yeah. And now it's like everywhere I look, I'm the perfect age for all of that. And and I certainly hear a lot about it everywhere. So it's really interesting to me to hear someone who has kind of been through that and who's said, look, I wish I have taken it, because as you said, it's too late. You can't go back now. But I do love to hear, and more power to you, that you do work out every day.
Yeah, it's important, and I'm going to get a personal trainer. That's one of my things for 2026, to help me start lifting heavier weights. So I've been just doing really light weights, but the evidence now, and I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners have heard it as well, that lifting heavier weights, doing real strength training, is really important for women in midlife and as they get older. So I'm going to start doing that.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love lifting heavy weights, and because I go with my partner, and because I have that little competitive instinct, I'm like, well, if he can lift it, I can lift it. But he's like twice the size of me, seriously, literally. And I'm like, no, I can do that. I can do that too. But it definitely keeps me motivated. He's my PT. So Mary Beth, thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy, your heart with us today. It has been just an absolute pleasure. I know it was your intention for people to walk away feeling, more excited about what's to come in midlife, and to be open to growth and of course, connection. Connection's a really important part of our lives as human beings. I got to say, I think you nailed it.
Thank you, Margit. This has been so much fun, such a pleasure, and you make it, really easy. Just to. It's just been a friendly conversation between you and me.
And that's truly what it is, And we set a really clear intention prior to starting, and I think that's shone through. So if you've fallen in love with Mary Beth in the way that I do, and you see her as I do, you can connect with her through LinkedIn. The link will be in the show notes for you. You might get an influx of connections. Who knows? If you're hearing this, that means you've stuck with us all the way through the first episode, and I say a huge thank you. I'm really excited about what's to come in Midlife Unfiltered, and I can say the guest episodes have officially begun. I'm your host, Margit Cruz, and I look forward to sharing this space with you next week. Thanks for tuning in to Midlife Unfiltered. I hope today sparked something meaningful and reminded you of what's possible in this season of life. If this episode lifted you up, share it with someone who could use the reminder. Subscribing will make sure that you're notified when a new episode is released, and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify also helps more people discover our little corner of midlife truth-telling. You can always reach out through Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. I love hearing from women who are walking this path with me. Interested in working with me? You'll find everything you need at margitcruz.com. And remember, midlife isn't an ending. It's your invitation to feel more alive than ever. See you next week. And now the legal stuff. The content in this podcast is provided for general information and inspiration only. It does not constitute medical, legal, or psychological advice, nor is it a substitute for independent professional care. Margit Cruz is not a registered health professional. You are responsible for your own choices and outcomes, and should always seek advice from an appropriately qualified professional.